Laura and I were headed to Alaska. The first night we made it to Hever, Montana, very close to the Canadian border. We crossed into Alberta at 8 in the morning when the border opened. This trip afforded us the second opportunity to stay and visit with my classmate Tom and Georgia Carter in Edmonton. Day 3 brought us to Dawson Creek and milepost 0 of the Alaska Highway. I had thought the Alaska Highway started when you reached Alaska. I was wrong. I was surprised to learn that it began in British Columbia and ended in Alaska's Yukon. I was further surprised that most of it was in Canada. The 1,400-mile-long Alaska Highway was built by the U.S. Army during World War II in just 9 months. Its immediate purpose was to defend the shores of Alaska from invasion by Japan. Traveling through British Columbia was simply beautiful and was where we saw the most bears. They were on both sides of the road. Of course, we stopped and videoed each and every one of them. We were sure that this little guy's mother was keeping a watchful eye from some distance away. This one walked right up to Henry, stood on its hind legs, and peered into our window. They were beautiful and delightful to watch. They joyfully slowed down our progress in getting to Alaska. On Laura's list was the town of Teslin, populated largely by Tlingit tribes. The Tlingit are an indigenous people of the Pacific Northwest coast, known for their rich art, matrilineal society, and maritime culture. The Tlingit in Teslin came from Juneau to hunt during the summer months. The founder of the town, George Johnson, was a self-taught Tlingit photographer whose pictures document the town's history. Despite there being no roads in the area, he purchased Teslin's first car. He purchased it in Juneau and brought it to Teslin on a barge. With the help of friends and neighbors, he built the first stretch of road upon which he could drive his new car. During the winter, though, he would drive it on the frozen lakes, giving him miles and miles of driving opportunities. He would fish and hunt on the frozen lakes from his car. It was a black car, which during the winter he would paint white for camouflage. How fortuitous that when we drove into the Tlingit Cultural Center, it was a festival day with drumming and singing and lovely displays. We even left the Cultural Center with free t-shirts depicting the 5 Tlingit tribes of Teslin. Day 4 brought us to the Laird River Hot Springs, a very popular stop on the Alaska Highway. The hot spring with its natural surroundings was wonderful, and we enjoyed a soak in the hot water. On day 5, we crossed into the Yukon. That felt a little ominous and exciting. From the sign, there was evidence that we were not the first to do so. Too many people, I think, have left their stickers on the sign. We drove on to the city of Whitehorse. The next day, July 1st, we learned was Canada Day. The parade was great to watch. Crowds lined the streets. Laura and I were given free flags at the visitor center. And yes, there were Canadian Mounties. The resident Philippine population had a large and lovely presence. An outdoor cultural and dance event in the evening topped off an awfully fun day. We enjoyed it, sitting on the lawn. After a trip to the Whitehorse Public Library in the morning, we headed south and spent the night in a Canadian national campground. The border crossing that morning brought us into Alaska. It was the first time for both of us. We would complete the Alaska Highway later on, but first there was Skagway. What a lovely little town. The next day there were 4 cruise ships with thousands of passengers unloading. Some of you know that though I have not been on a ship since I came to college in 1967, I love seeing them. They always fill me with travel adventure lore. As a kid, it was so much fun traveling back and forth to the United States on them every 5 years. Back then, they actually looked like ships, rather than the floating hotel look of cruise ships today. In Skagway, we saw a lot of people enjoying the popular Alaskan fry bread. This little girl gave quite a sales pitch. We thought we would get some, until, that is, we saw the line. On day 8, we were not to board a cruise ship, but instead the fast ferry to Juneau. Despite it being the capital of Alaska, it is unreachable by road. I loved the 4-hour ferry ride. Laura and I got to sit up front. It was a family-owned and run ferry ride, and the captain and Taylor, the hen crew, were so much fun. They went from side to side of the fjord to show us the wildlife. There were sea lions sunning themselves, waving to us or just scratching. They spotted a number of whales for us to see. We got nice and close to some. Such grace. The main reason Laura put Juneau on our route, despite there being no roads to get there, was her interest in learning more about the Tlingit people, their culture, and their art. An additional reason was to visit the Mendenhall Glacier. After checking into the historic and reasonably priced Juneau Hotel, we used public transportation to reach the closest bus stop to the glacier's visitor center. From there, it was only a 1.5-mile walk. The visitor center provided us with the best view of the Mendenhall Glacier. We were happy to be able to see some of the blue ice you often see in glaciers. After a good look at the glacier, we decided to do one of the 4-mile hikes up into the mountain. The trail was lush and lovely. We enjoyed a waterfall along the way. I was up early and down at the Juneau docks on day 9. It was a thick, misty morning. My eye caught something emerging slowly from the mist. It was one of those huge 7,000 passenger cruise ships. They are massive. They ease into the dock without attracting much attention. In fact, I was the only one watching on the dock that morning. But I was having the time of my life watching how the captain skillfully inched the huge ship forward. Any miscalculation would be disastrous. I know what you're thinking. It sure doesn't take much to entertain some people. Watching the hour-long docking process had already made my day. However, it was the 4th of July, and we were in Juneau, the capital city of Alaska. We both spent time in the public library. Here's the view from where I was sitting. Outside and directly across from me was one of those huge cruise ships. Having done Juneau, that evening we once again enjoyed the ferry ride. This time we were headed back to Skagway. After spending the night in the Skagway National Forest campground, on day 11 we crossed back into Canada and headed back to Whitehorse to get back on the Alaska Highway. That evening, we crossed into Alaska for a second time and enjoyed a free National Forest campground beside a beautiful lake. On day 12, as we got closer to Fairbanks and further north, we started seeing higher mountains and stopped thinking that we might be seeing Denali, formerly Mount McKinley, the highest mountain in the United States. However, it was really too cloudy to see for sure. What do you think? Those of you who have been there, does any one of these peaks look like Denali? Someone I'd met in Juneau said that the paddleboat river ride was well worth the money. Well, I like boats, so that's all it took. It was much more than a ride. Before we left the dock, they demonstrated how they get around on their float planes. Well, I love planes too. Really anything that has to do with travel, and I'm a sucker. It landed and then took off again, this time with a salute with its wings. After departing, we paused along the bank for an introduction to dog sledding. A little later, another pause to be shown their traditional salmon fishing contraption, and then a demonstration of filleting and drying salmon. Next, we all got off the boat to learn about Athabascan life, where we learned about Athabascan history and culture. We saw the houses they built. They hunted for their own use as well as for trade. One of our presenters went into this home and came out demonstrating their elaborately made bridal clothes from many kinds of animal skins and furs.
Riverboat, Timberwolf. Now get your cameras ready because she is going to show you her sunshine run. Wow. The outer part of the Parker roof is made from Timberwolf and the inner part will...
Before getting back on the boat, we were given free time just to wander around and explore on our own. The Riverboat Company was a family-owned business, and I heartily agree that we got our money's worth from the experience. Having heard about the midnight sun in northern Alaska, we decided to stay up and see it for ourselves. Just before midnight, we drove around looking for a good vantage point. Back at our campground, we snapped this picture right at the stroke of midnight. I have been asked if I had trouble sleeping with it staying light at night. Tired every night from traveling, I had no trouble sleeping at all. It was at the museum where we watched a planetarium presentation of the Northern Lights. Day 14 brought us to the charming town of Talkeetna, which provided some of the inspiration for the Northern Exposure TV series. Both of us being avid fans of the show, while in Alaska, we watched an episode every night. We were told that Denali was visible from the town of Talkeetna, unless, that is, it is hidden by clouds. Many Alaska travelers never see the famous mountain except in pictures. We joined their ranks. On our way to Homer on day 14, we took several side trips. We ventured off-route to see this historic Russian Orthodox church built in 1894. A strong Russian culture and presence exists in southwest Alaska to this day. Another detour took us to the little town of Hope. We found an interesting museum, some small shops, and several lovely campgrounds. We did not get to Homer until late that evening, where we camped in the driveway of my schoolmate Marbeth and our partner Cindy. I was up early and captured some pictures of the sunrise. They have a cabin with an amazing view of the mountains and ocean. The next day, Marbeth and Cindy joined us for lunch at the Harbor Grill. We very easily fell in love with the town of Homer, Alaska. It was cool seeing sandhill cranes feeding in the water around Homer. For several years, I have camped beside the migrating sandhill cranes in Arizona. How very cool to see that they also enjoyed their summer trip to Alaska. We were really excited on day 17, hoping to watch salmon jump and swim up the Russian Falls. We had seen this on YouTube. Perhaps we would even see bears at the falls catching the salmon, as we had also seen on YouTube. It meant a 6-mile hike to the falls and back. It was raining when we arrived. The rain and the mosquitoes did not deter us. Being warned of bears along the hike, Laura had gone into a Fred Meyer store to buy bear spray. However, seeing the price, she came back out without a purchase. We decided instead to deter the bears with our talking and perhaps even singing. The Russian Falls were quite a sight to see. And indeed, at the bottom of the falls, you could see 100 or so salmon screwing up their courage for the swim up the falls. However, none of them were doing so. Later, we were told that all at once, they would have started jumping and swimming up the falls at the same time. That would have been quite an amazing show, but it was not to be for us this time around. With my camera tracing the route they would need to take to get up the Russian Falls, I was completely amazed that it was possible at all. On to Seward, where we enjoyed a cup of coffee at the Resurrection Art Cafe, formerly a church, then an art gallery, and now also a cafe. A hike to the Exit Glacier was next. I find glaciers to be so very interesting. Again, at this glacier, the blue ice was visible. Day 18 brought us to Anchorage, where half of the residents of Alaska make their home. We had heard that the best pizza in all of Alaska could be found at Moose Tooth Pizza. They were famous for their Call of the Wild pizza with reindeer sausage. It did not disappoint.
3, 2, 1, go!
Having watched the start of the Iditarod some months ago, I wanted to see where in Anchorage this famous 1,000-mile dog sled race started each year. We thoroughly enjoyed our time at the Alaskan Cultural and Heritage Museum, where we learned about traditional youth sports competitions, music, and dance. Constructed on the museum grounds were typical houses of the first Alaskans. I ventured into one of them. How delightful. We were back in Anchorage on the morning of day 19 and enjoyed the public library before starting our trip back home. Anchorage was the last stop on the route Laura had planned for us, but I learned that she had more adventures in store. Rather than heading home, we drove back to Willow in order to take the less traveled dirt road over Hutchinson Pass. The road really was not too bad, And even after 3 weeks of viewing all kinds of beauty, we learned that there was still more to see. The frozen blue lake up at Hatchetson Pass surpassed much of the beauty already enjoyed. That evening, we dined in Palmer and stayed in the nearby State Park campground. But there was still more. Laura pointed out that we had not yet driven the famed unpaved top-of-the-world highway, nor had we visited Dawson City. So on day 20, we went back to Tok, Alaska to drive the top-of-the-world highway. We had been rained on almost every day in Alaska, but never before had it hailed. Henry did not much like the hail, but the rainbow that followed definitely helped. After crossing back into Canada on the top-of-the-world highway, we found a campsite on the river just this side of Dawson City. It was a surprise to us to learn that the highway ended at the river, where there was no bridge. We did not immediately see the ferry coming from the other side. Was it big enough for Henry? If we took it, would it bring us back to the campground late at night? Dawson City provides a 24/7 free ferry service. Amazing. We had not heard that you had to take a ferry to get to Dawson City. The ferry was fun, and the town was adorable. On day 21, we drove from Dawson City to Whitehorse, where we spent the night in a motel. The U.S. border was our destination for day 22. Still, we felt we just had to stop and take another soak in the Laird River hot spring. All pretty amazing how this hot water rushes out of the ground year after year. Our return route took us to Jasper and through the Canadian Rockies. It is an amazing highway to drive. The majestic mountains of the Canadian Rockies are filled with glaciers and huge year-round ice fields. The length of the Manasuka Glacier was most impressive. Guides were present with equipment needed to hike on the glacier. Costing $150 a person, we decided to pass it up. After an early supper at the historic Banff Spring Hotel, we headed to the U.S. border. We spent the night in a Lions Club campground in the small town of Warner, just miles from the border. Our final day 23 completed our trip with a very, very long drive from the Canadian-U.S. border to Longmont, Colorado. The odometer on Henry, my VW Eurovan, and my full-time home told us that we had driven 8,121 miles. It was a wonderful trip that will be memorable for the rest of our lives.